I am a stubborn person, often to a fault. I hate giving up, even if it might be a lost cause. My stubbornness is a problem, I know that. It leads me into situations where I know I should change course, but comfort and a sense of determination keep me from acting. I try to be rational, and in cases where I am expected to believe the unbelievable, I have a hard time. Now, I find myself in an impossible situation where I don't have a choice. I must acknowledge I am seeing what I am seeing. And I wish I wasn't, because I don't know what to do now. Sorry, I keep getting distracted. I hear the crashing and banging in the basement again. Lania must be at it again. She is always like that. I know I should say something, but what choice do I have? I can't rock the boat. I need this house and her money, so I will do what I always do and ignore those sounds coming from the basement. And the implications. Maybe I will talk to her tomorrow. But let me tell you how I got to this point, and you can decide for yourself what you might do in this sort of circumstance. It was about a year ago I found myself in a position I had been working towards for a while. I was finally confident that I would be able to buy a home. The market is rough now, and I have a good job. With the crazy prices, though, I thought it was unattainable. Yet I had started looking all the same. I had contacted a real estate agent and toured a few places. After a couple of months of no good options, I started to lose hope, but then I received a listing for the perfect house. My eyes lit up when I looked at the features, and I was over the moon. The price seemed reasonable, if a little high, but I was worried since I did not have much to put down and my credit was not the best. I was assured it was okay, and after getting qualified for the first mortgage I applied for, I finally signed on the dotted line and got the keys. I had done it. I had finally bought this place, my first home. I was so happy with the house. I loved it. Yet even then, I found myself asking, could I really stay here? I wanted it to be my forever home. It is truly perfect, but I am terrified of the feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach. The creeping dread of pure evil. Yes, I was horrified. My interest rate was 9% on this house for a 30-year mortgage. I know, right? I was so obsessed with the idea of owning my own home that I did not realize how much my actual payments would be at that high an interest rate, and I started to panic when I saw the huge cost. I figured I would maybe get a second job or try to get some overtime to compensate. I was just happy I had my own house. That's all that mattered. The house was a gorgeous Victorian, over a century old but still in good shape. I was over the moon when I saw the place. It had everything I wanted, and I knew I would find a way to make the extreme cost work somehow. I didn't have much to move in and knew I would have to buy furniture as I went, but that didn't bother me. Moving day was hard work as I moved what little I had all by myself. I took a break before the small U-Haul was finally unloaded to get a drink of water and tested the tap. I turned it on and was troubled after a long delay before anything came out. Slowly, a reddish liquid trickled and started to flow from the faucet. It had a thick viscosity and almost smelled like blood. No, it couldn't be. Must just be the pipes. I blinked and saw clear water flowing from the sink and brushed the crazy perception off. I returned back and forth several times as the afternoon drew on, carrying boxes and wishing I had called for some help moving after all. I paused, admiring the floors and trying not to scrape them up too much with my items. The house had its original hardwood floor from the looks of it, and I would be devastated if it was damaged. There was a sound of something crashing in the basement, and I winced at the thought of whatever had been broken down there. A lot of old antique dishware was down there from the previous owners, and though I was not likely to use it, I thought it might be valuable and I may even be able to sell it. Had I left something close to the shelves that fell and broke them? I went downstairs to check. The basement door was hanging open, slowly swaying despite the fact I had been fairly sure I closed it earlier. There was a foul smell emerging from the aperture as well, and I was not sure what had happened down there. I went downstairs and saw it for the first time. I gasped aloud as I looked at what was down there. There was a puddle of dark liquid which might have been blood here as well. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw an emaciated and skeletal body on the ground in the basement. I turned my head and it was no longer there. If it ever had been. I got closer to see what had happened and saw broken glass, figuring maybe it was some sort of jar of old preserves or something. I stepped back and screamed when I heard a hiss and saw the body of a snake slither into a nearby crevice. Oh God, there are snakes in the basement. I didn't think they could just get into houses. I hurried back upstairs to get the broom to sweep up the mess and maybe look up snake deterrents. I saw a strange-looking woman staring at me through the kitchen window. I blinked and her face was gone. I started to doubt my senses again. After the first day and the weirdness in the basement, the normal day-to-day was good. But the good times wouldn't last. The worst news I could receive was just about to happen. I received a call informing me I was being laid off from my job. I had to scramble to find work, and I was barely able to pay my exceedingly high mortgage. I could barely afford food, and if something went wrong or needed repair, I would never be able to afford the fix. I realized I would need a roommate or something to help split the costs and make it more affordable until I could get another decent paying job. That was the first time I met Lania. Before I could even write up a request to advertise, I got a knock at my door. It was a tall, pale-skinned young woman with black hair and very serious eyes. The pupils seemed very narrow, almost akin to a cat or snake. She gave an air of authority and threat, but also allure. She stared at me for a moment, and I started to feel uneasy before she finally spoke.
I'm here for the room,
she said very bluntly, almost as if it was a demand rather than a request. I hadn't even advertised it yet, so how did this lady know I needed a roommate? How did you know already? I asked, completely dumbfounded. She looked at me and then behind me into the house and produced an envelope with $3,000 in it. Holy smokes, lady, I was going to ask for references, but this will do. That's more than what I was going to charge for the rent. A glimmer of a smile appeared on the woman's face, and she spoke.
Think of it as a security deposit.
I hate to say it, but at the time, I was ignoring the many red flags and just focusing on how good-looking, albeit kind of intense, this girl wanted to pay so much up front to live with me. This plus my savings meant I had enough to pay the mortgage and then some. I was so happy I failed to see a lot of things and ask a lot of questions that should have been asked. Lania moved in shockingly fast and made herself at home. We didn't see too much of each other because she worked a graveyard shift as a nurse or something, she had said. I figured it must have been since I saw her in the early morning in blood-covered scrubs and figured it might have been the ER or something. She was a model roommate though, with no issues, very tidy, and always paid her portion of the bills not only on time, but normally early. Weirdly, it was always in cash, never with a check or something digital. But maybe she had an old heart and preferred paper currency. The only thing I did notice was she always kept dishes and silverware in her room and sometimes left very little in the kitchen when I needed some. When I reminded her, she would bring it back. One time, when I was loading the dishwasher, I saw a few plates covered in a reddish, sticky color that almost looked like blood. She must like rare steaks, I figured. At this point, I had secured a part-time retail job which was enough to pay a quarter of the mortgage and hardly any food. Surprisingly, Lania was happy to pay for the rest and the utilities to boot. I didn't know how or why she was willing to help so much, but I didn't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. One night, I arrived home and found the door unlocked, and it seemed like Lania was home. At least her car was there. I walked inside and heard something that sounded like muffled crying, and then a shrill scream. I raced to her room and barged in. I was not prepared for what I saw. I found her splayed out on her bed. She was naked and her face was covered with red paint or maybe blood. She was entwined with what looked like a large type of snake or python, and it was writhing across her body. I was stunned by the sight. I didn't even realize how my intrusion might be perceived. She fixed her gaze on me. Then I realized I made a mistake. I didn't know what was going on, but I took a step back and looked away as I retreated, realizing my eyes had been lingering on her bare chest. My cheeks reddened, and I quickly blurted out an apology. Oh God, I'm sorry, Lania. I didn't know what was going on, and I thought you were in trouble. Shifting my gaze away, but on the corner of my eye, I thought I saw her teeth take on an oddly pointed quality, and her pupils shifted like they had the day I met her. Her initial surprise and anger calmed somewhat, and despite the embarrassing situation I walked into, she made no effort to cover herself and simply said,
"Please leave. Now."
I didn't need to be told twice. When I left, I realized I needed to grab the groceries I had bought and bring them inside. I went out to the garage again and near the laundry room. I saw what looked like an outfit for a delivery driver. It was torn up pretty badly. There was also a wallet near the washing machine that did not look like it belonged to Lania. I wondered if she had someone over. I saw a nearby name tag that read, Ted. Maybe she was dating someone named Ted. I didn't think much of it until the following week when I started to see missing person posters up around the neighborhood, inquiring about any information regarding a Theodore Wilkes, who had been declared missing. I thought of Lania and the weird behavior in the name tag. Ted, short for Theodore. The implication was disturbing, but there are a lot of Teds, I figured. I also tried to put out of my mind the fact that he was a delivery driver. 1 month later, with my hours being cut for my retail job and still no luck with a job search, I was getting frustrated and feeling hopeless. I was only financially stable thanks to Lania, who continued, seemingly without objections, to pay almost all the bills. She was always nice to me when we did interact. Besides the accidental walk-in, she never seemed hostile or dangerous. Yet so many other things concerned me. I didn't know if she was just eccentric or what. The snake thing was weird though, as well as finding that name tag. Something was going on that she was not telling me. I was up late into the night looking for job listings when I heard Lania in the basement again. I did not know she was back yet. She said she normally worked nights, but it was only 10:30 p.m. I figured she would be at work still. The sound was louder than normal, and I heard strange music being played at an incredibly loud volume. I wouldn't mind it if it was earlier, but I was about to try and get some sleep, so I decided to check on her. Frustratingly, she rarely kept a cell phone on hand, otherwise I would have just texted her to respectfully keep it down. I realized with creeping dread I would have to go down there and ask her to be quiet. I considered trying to ignore it, but it got louder somehow, and there was a sound of shrieking or moaning from what sounded like another woman. I didn't know what was going on, but I hadn't wanted to get involved. I lay on my bed with my pillow over my head, trying to ignore the sound until I heard an awful scream that sounded like someone was in trouble. I raced out of my room downstairs into the basement door. I summoned my courage and knocked loudly on the door several times, shouting, "Is everything okay in there?" There was a long pause with no sound other than the blaring music. I was about to knock again when the music was shut off, and I heard shuffling and a loud crash of something heavy being dropped to the ground. The sound of the door unlocked was promptly followed by Lania stepping outside and fixing me with a placating smile, and a sheepish yet definitely feigned ignorant response.
Everything is fine.
I was slightly annoyed by the gaslighting and tried my best not to be too combative with my response, since I still felt like I couldn't endanger our dynamic in a way that might make her move out. Lania, with respect, what was that sound just now? It sounded like someone was hurt. Are you okay? And if everything is alright, could we please keep the music down at night? I know you're on a nocturnal schedule, but I'm not. I immediately looked at her reaction to see if I'd overstepped, but she just kept smiling and insisted.
I saw a huge spider and got startled. I'm working on another art project in here, and I get carried away. The music helps me channel my creativity. I will keep it to a dull roar for you in the future. I'm sorry.
She seemed to wink at the last statement, and I was unsettled, but I didn't want to press the subject. So I agreed, and thanked her for understanding, and went back to my room. It was an obvious lie, but what was I going to do about it? I hoped I would find a better job soon and start being able to save enough to cover costs myself. Or maybe get a slightly less eccentric roommate who I could trust was not doing God knows what in the basement in the middle of the night. The final and most recent event occurred 2 weeks ago. I had grown desensitized to most of the bizarre behavior of Lania as she continued to pay her bills on time and keep to her own affairs. But a simple household chore led me to see something that I can never unsee, and added an entirely dangerous level of uncertainty about my roommate and her real nature. I was going about my day-to-day business at home. Another day off since my hours were terrible at the store. I was barely working 20 hours a week. I had grown despondent at continuing to look for job options after so long searching with no results or positive encouragement. I decided I would busy myself with household chores. I was cleaning up a few things when I heard a loud beeping. I wondered what it could be, and then I realized it was the low battery signal of the carbon monoxide detector. It sounded like it was coming from the device in Lania's room. I changed the battery on mine a month earlier, but realized I never changed hers and the battery was running low apparently. It was midday and I thought she might be asleep. I grabbed a couple of AA batteries and set them near her door so I wouldn't have to go in and change them. After almost an hour, she did not emerge from the room and the beeping continued. It was a very loud chirp, and regardless of replacing them or not, I wanted to at least stop the thing from making that racket. So, I made the mistake of going into Lania's room for the first time since the incident I walked in on her. I knew it was a bad idea, but I slowly approached the door and knocked several times. No response was forthcoming, so I knocked again and nervously called out, "Lania, are you here?" No response. I called out louder than before. "Come on, Lania. You don't hear that sound? That's the carbon monoxide detector. It will keep doing that unless we change the battery. I have them right here. Can we please change them, or will you let me come in real quick?" Once again, silence. I tried the door, and to my surprise, it was unlocked. The room was very dark. The windows had been covered up with blackout curtains or something. I turned on my phone's flashlight and shined it briefly on the bed to check. It was empty. I looked up and saw in the corner of the room the blinking detector and the target of my uninvited intrusion into her room. I stepped forward and promptly tripped on something. It was a large duffel bag that was partially open. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't suppress the urge to investigate. So I shined my light on it and was confused when I saw a large assortment of name tags, wallets, engraved jewelry, and various charms or mementos, all of which bore different names. None seemed to actually say Lania. I also saw that Ted name tag again. With the assortment of other named items, I was deeply disturbed by the implications of this grab bag of others' personal effects and did not like any of the scenarios it implied. I took a step back and almost jumped out of my skin when I heard a hiss and the striking of a glass wall, then saw a row of terrariums that contained several large snakes. I knew she must have had one before, but I didn't know why she had this many. They seemed oddly perturbed and upset by my presence, and the one who made the sound had attacked the glass to try and reach me. I shuddered when I considered they might be venomous. I tried to catch my breath when my blood froze as I stood there, hearing the distinct certainty of a moving sound coming from the attached bathroom. It sounded like an enormous slithering sound like that of a snake, but far too large. I crept closer to the bathroom and heard a sickening crunching sound like bone being snapped in half. My heart was hammering in my chest and I couldn't move, but I saw a large shadow looming near the other side of the bathroom door. I covered my mouth and tried to slowly back out of the room. Suddenly, the door handle began to turn, and I fell back into the dark corner of the room. The door didn't open just then for whatever reason. The figure on the other side continued to slide around in the bathroom, and another savage crunch was heard. I let out a controlled raspy gasp to not make too much noise, and I pressed my hands against the wall to steady myself. As I touched the wall, I felt something gross and sticky. I managed to sit upright and slowly step away from the wall, trying to be as quiet as I could. I gently reached back into my pocket to get my phone and turned to face the corner of the wall I had just pressed up against. Once the light shone on the scene, I felt like I was going to be sick. The corner held an array of large bundles of meat still slicked with gore and wrapped in a large bundle of butcher's twine. I did not like the shape of the thing at all. The proportions were very large, but not so large as to be bovine or deer. Some seemed to be disturbingly suggestive in length and general outline to that of the human anatomy. I didn't know if the light was playing tricks on me, but I could have sworn I saw the outline of an entire human-sized femur and a partially flensed chunk of meat. I turned away in disgust at the smell and general horror of the scene and quickly crept towards the door. The handle once again jostled on the bathroom door, and this time it did start to open. I flung myself forward onto the ground and crawled under the bed. I held my breath but almost let out a gasp as I saw what appeared to be a partially eaten human head under the bed near where I was hiding. I held both hands over my mouth and closed my eyes as I heard the terrible dragging sound of the titanic serpentine body slithering over the floor. I almost screamed aloud when, after a pause, a scaled hand reached underneath the bed and groped for something near where I was. It reached for a moment and then grasped the half-eaten head and pulled it out. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I simply waited in terrified suspense as I heard an awful crunching and tearing sound, and the sucking guttural consumption of the morbid meal from a creature not fully used to chewing its food. I also saw under there, when I opened my eyes again, the discarded dishes from my dining set, caked in what looked alarmingly like dried blood. I lost track of the exact time I spent in that nightmare room, listening to the thing finish its morbid meal. Then somehow the slithering about the room stopped, and I heard the soft padding of human feet and a sudden pressure on the bed above me as if someone was laying down. Daring to set my eyes ahead and look out slightly, I saw two normal-looking woman's feet and heard a soft sing-song humming of a song as a figure bent down and put shoes on and walked forward. I then heard the sound of the door, and she had departed from the room. I let out a loud exhale of exhausted fear, and I fought the dueling urges to either cower under here for a bit longer or rush out of this nightmare room in a blind frenzy panic, regardless of how close its horrifying occupant might still be. I tried to calm myself down, and eventually, after what may have been 2 or 3 minutes, I pulled myself from under the bed and rushed out of the room. I whirled back to close the door to Lania's room, and as the door clicked, with my hand still on the doorknob, I heard a voice call out,
"Is there something you need in my room?"
I froze in place, terrified of turning around for fear of what I might see. I managed to spin my petrified body around, and I saw Lania. No monster, just Lania. She was fully dressed, no blood covering her body, and no snakes writhed about. I stood there staring dumbly before her, stammering for an answer. Her eyes narrowed at my reaction, and I realized I just needed to say something. I looked at the battery still sitting by her door. I needed to change the batteries on your carbon monoxide detector. Almost on cue, the shrill beep was heard again to accentuate my point and give me what was at first a genuine answer to her question. She looked on incredulously, but seemed to soften as she winced when she heard the shrill beep again, seemingly noticing now that I had pointed it out.
"Yeah, I can see how that would be annoying. Please, allow me."
She brushed past me back into her room, and after a minute the beeping was gone. She came back out and smiled at me.
"Oh, I almost forgot. Here."
She handed me an envelope. It contained an assortment of bills, many which were stained with a disturbing dark brown color. In total, it looked to be close to $4,000. She winked at me and brushed past me, and I stood there dumbfounded as I heard the front door open and close, and a car leaving shortly thereafter. I have no idea what just happened, or if what I experienced was real or a nightmare. I know now what I fear is likely the truth, but what did I really see? Whatever Lania is doing, or indeed whatever she might truly be, I do not know. But I do know that besides the mess and the eccentricities, she pays her bills on time. The awful nightmare of a serpentine woman hybrid who preys on men is damnably suggestive of the story of the demonic Lamia. I considered her name too, Lania. Maybe I will ask her about it later. But for now, I think I should deposit this money into my account and start a savings account. Perhaps I can afford to ask her to leave a little bit later. Yes, I think that would be the safer option. Demons can't be real, right? But homelessness sure is. And I mean, I am just being paranoid. Right?